Inglés. Margaret Thompson stood outside the luxury car dealership, her heart racing with excitement and a hint of nervousness. At 80 years old, she had never envisioned herself in such a place, where shiny vehicles glimmered under the bright lights, and the scent of new leather filled the air. Today was not just another day, it was a celebration of her independence and the fruits of a lifetime spent caring for her family. It was time to treat herself, to indulge in a dream she had nurtured for years, a sleek silver convertible that had caught her eye in a magazine months ago. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed her hair and adjusted her glasses, stepping through the glass doors with a sense of purpose. The modern interior of the dealership was adorned with polished marble and chrome accents, a stark contrast to the modest home she had lived in for decades. As she walked deeper into the showroom, Margaret's mind drifted back to the sacrifices she had made over the years, working 2 jobs to support her children, forgoing her own desires for the sake of her family, and ultimately losing her beloved husband James to illness. In that moment, she felt a surge of pride. She had earned this day. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Silverline Motors." A cheerful voice interrupted her thoughts. A young salesman with tousled hair and an eager smile approached her. "I'm Jake. How can I assist you today?" "I'm here to look at the convertible," Margaret replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "Ah, the silver beauty. Fantastic choice. Just let me show you." Jake's enthusiasm faded as he glanced at Margaret's face, and an unexpected flicker of judgment crossed his features. "But, are you sure it's the right car for you? I mean, it's quite sporty, not meant for someone your age, if you don't mind me saying." Margaret felt her cheeks flush as if she had been slapped. The thrill of the day drained away, replaced by a heavy weight of humiliation. "Excuse me? I've been driving for over 60 years. I think I know what I can handle," she said, her voice trembling but firm. She could feel the eyes of other customers on her, their whispers weaving a web of doubt around her. Jake shrugged, a dismissive gesture that stung more than he could understand. "Well, we do have other options that might be more suitable," he suggested, motioning toward a row of more subdued vehicles. Practical, family-oriented cars that felt like a gentle pat on the back rather than the exhilarating rush she craved. "No, thank you. I'm specifically interested in the convertible," Margaret insisted, her heart pounding with indignation. She had come here to reclaim a piece of her youth, to embrace the freedom that life had to offer her now that her responsibilities had lessened. But Jake merely nodded, a look of disbelief etched on his face, as if he couldn't fathom the notion that a woman of her age could desire anything more than a minivan. Feeling overwhelmed, Margaret turned on her heel and made her way toward the exit, the door's chime sounding like a dirge. Tears pricked at her eyes, not just from the sting of rejection, but from the realization that ageism was alive and well, even in a place that should have been welcoming. As she stepped out into the sunlight, the warmth on her face did little to soothe the chill in her heart. "Why did I let him get to me?" she whispered to herself, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I'm not defined by my age." The anger bubbled within her, mixing with the pain of the encounter. She had fought through life's challenges, and a dismissive salesman was not going to define her worth. Margaret paused on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath. She could either let this incident dictate her self-image or reclaim her power. "I will not let this be the end," she resolved, straightening her posture. With renewed determination, she turned back toward the dealership, her feet moving swiftly as she marched back through the doors. Inside, the showroom buzzed with activity, and Jake was busy chatting with a younger couple, his laughter carrying across the space. Margaret felt a surge of indignation as she approached. "Excuse me, Jake," she called out, her voice steady. He turned, his expression shifting from jovial to apprehensive. "Oh, hey there, back again?" "Yes, I am, and I'd like to talk to you about what you said earlier," she said, her heart racing with the thrill of confrontation. The couple nearby glanced over, intrigued. Jake's demeanor changed. the casual confidence fading as he shuffled his feet. "Look, it's just that—" "No, it's not just that. It's ageism, and it should not be tolerated," Margaret interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "I've earned my right to choose whatever car I want, regardless of my age. I deserve respect, just like any other customer in this dealership." The couple exchanged glances, and Margaret felt their support silently radiating toward her. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He seemed to recognize the growing tension, the way other customers were now watching with interest. "Listen, I'm sorry if I offended you," he finally muttered, though his tone lacked sincerity. "But this car is not meant for someone my age, right?" Margaret cut in, her resolve hardening. "You don't know me or what I can handle. I am more than my age, and you should treat me as such." The silence hung in the air, thick with disbelief and tension. Margaret could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she stood firm, unwilling to back down. Just then, she noticed a kind face watching from a distance, a woman in her 70s, with striking gray hair and a warm smile. The woman nodded slightly, as if encouraging Margaret to continue. "I'm not the only one who faces this kind of discrimination," Margaret continued, her voice gaining strength. "There are countless seniors who are treated as if they have nothing to offer or enjoy. We deserve better." Jake shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if seeking escape. Okay, I get it. Let me see what I can do," he finally conceded, though his tone remained less than enthusiastic. As he turned away, Margaret took a deep breath, feeling a mix of triumph and lingering hurt. She had stood up for herself, but the battle was far from over. The older woman approached her, her kind eyes sparkling with understanding. "Thank you for speaking up," she said, her voice soothing. "I'm Elaine. I know how hard it is to confront this kind of bias." Margaret smiled, grateful for the unexpected support. "I just can't believe it's still happening, even here." Elaine nodded, her expression serious. "Ageism is everywhere, and it affects us all. But together, we can make our voices heard." As Margaret looked around the dealership, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something larger than just a car purchase. Maybe it was a chance to challenge the status quo and redefine what it meant to grow older. With a new sense of purpose, she knew she would not let this experience define her. Instead, it would fuel her determination to stand up for herself and others who had been silenced by ageism. Margaret Thompson took a deep breath, her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and determination as she stood outside the luxury car dealership the next day. The sun cast a warm glow over the sleek vehicles on display, but the excitement she had felt the previous day had been replaced with a steely resolve. She had spent the night researching the car she had her heart set on, armed with statistics about its performance and safety ratings, ready to prove her worth as a customer. Today, she would not be dismissed so easily. As she stepped through the automatic glass doors, the familiar scent of leather and polish enveloped her. The showroom was bustling with customers, young couples browsing the latest models, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Yet, as Margaret entered, she felt the weight of their gazes upon her. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and she caught snippets of conversation like, "Isn't she a bit old for that?" and "What does she know about luxury cars?" They didn't know her story, her sacrifices, or the dreams she had deferred for so long. She spotted Jake, the young salesman who had so callously dismissed her the day before. He was leaning against a shiny new model, flicking through his phone, his expression bored and disinterested. When he noticed her approach, his eyes rolled in exasperation. "Oh, it's you again," he said, a hint of mockery lacing his voice. "Back for more advice on what car to buy? I told you, we have better options for someone your age." Margaret felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she suppressed it and straightened her spine. "I'm here to talk about the convertible," she replied, her voice steady. "I did some research, and I believe it's a perfect fit for me." "Really? You think a sports car is suitable for someone who probably shouldn't be driving at all?" Jake shot back, his tone dripping with condescension. Why? Because I'm 80. Let me tell you something, Jake. I've been driving longer than you've been alive. I know what I want, and I deserve to be treated with respect, Margaret said, her voice rising slightly, catching the attention of nearby customers who turned to watch the exchange. Just then, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes stepped forward. Elaine, the woman Margaret had seen in the dealership yesterday, had been quietly observing the interaction. "Excuse me," she interjected, her voice calm yet firm. "I couldn't help but overhear. You should really reconsider how you speak to this lady. She's here to purchase a car, just like anyone else." Jake crossed his arms, unimpressed. "And what's your point? This isn't a charity. We have standards for our clientele." Elaine took a step closer to Margaret, her presence reassuring. "The only standard here should be customer service. Age should never dictate how someone is treated, especially when they're ready to make a significant purchase." Margaret felt a warmth spread through her at Elaine's words. She had been feeling so alone in her fight, but here was someone who understood and was willing to stand up for her. "Thank you, Elaine," Margaret said, her voice softening. "It's disheartening to think that my age could overshadow my experience and desires." Jake shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as more customers began to take notice of the confrontation. "Look, I'm just doing my job," he muttered. "If you want a different model, I can show you some older cars that might suit you better." Elaine shook her head in disbelief. "That's not the point, Jake. Margaret deserves the same opportunity to choose the car she wants, just like anyone else here. Age doesn't diminish her right to enjoy life." The tension in the air was palpable, and Margaret could feel her heart racing. She had come back to confront Jake, but now she found herself standing beside Elaine, united in their fight against ageism. "I've worked hard for my money, Jake. I've saved, sacrificed, and now I want to treat myself," she added, her voice gaining strength. "I refuse to let your bias dictate what I can enjoy in my golden years." Jake's brow furrowed, and for a moment, he seemed taken aback by the force of Margaret's words. "Okay, fine. I'll get the keys for the convertible," he said begrudgingly. But as he turned to walk away, he muttered under his breath, "It's just a waste of money." Elaine caught his comment and turned sharply. "You know what? It's not your place to judge how someone spends their money. You need to remember that every customer has the right to be treated with dignity." As Jake disappeared into the back of the dealership, Margaret felt a rush of gratitude toward Elaine. "Thank you for standing up for me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's been so long since someone has treated me like I matter." Elaine smiled warmly. "We've all been there. I've faced my share of ageism too, and it's infuriating. But we can't let them push us around. We deserve to be heard and respected." Margaret nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie with this kind stranger. "It's empowering to know I'm not alone in this fight. I thought this was going to be a joyful experience, and instead, it turned into something I never expected." Just then, Jake returned, the keys to the convertible dangling from his fingers. "Here," he said, tossing them onto the counter in front of Margaret. "Let's get this over with." Margaret's heart sank briefly at his dismissive demeanor, but she took a deep breath and resolved to not let his attitude affect her. "I'd like to take it for a test drive," she said, her voice even. Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly unenthused. "You really think you can handle it? It's a powerful car." "I've been driving for decades, Jake. I know how to handle a car. Now, if you could just show me how it works, I'd appreciate it," she replied, standing her ground. With a reluctant sigh, Jake led her outside to the convertible, its silver exterior gleaming in the sunlight. Margaret's heart raced as she approached it, her dreams of owning such a car bubbling to the surface once more. She slipped into the driver's seat, feeling the soft leather embrace her like an old friend. Elaine watched from the sidelines, a supportive smile on her face as Margaret adjusted the seat and mirrors. She could see Margaret's confidence growing, and it filled her with hope. This was more than just a car. It was a symbol of Margaret's resilience and refusal to be diminished by her age. "All right then," Jake said, his tone still lacking enthusiasm. "Just remember, it's not as easy to handle as it looks." Margaret turned to him, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "I'll be just fine, thank you. Let's see what this baby can do." As she pulled out of the lot, the engine roared to life, sending a thrill through her. With each turn of the wheel, she felt young again, her spirits soaring with the wind whipping through her hair. She glanced at Elaine, who was beaming with pride, and she felt a rush of gratitude for the unexpected ally in her corner. "Let's go!" Margaret exclaimed, her laughter mingling with the engine's purr. In that moment, she was not just an elderly woman. She was a woman reclaiming her joy, her independence, and her right to enjoy life to the fullest. Margaret stood at the entrance of the dealership, her heart racing and her hands slightly trembling. The glimmering cars on display sparkled under the soft showroom lights, but the thrill she felt yesterday was now eclipsed by a storm of emotions. With Elaine's encouragement echoing in her mind, she took a deep breath, straightened her back, and stepped forward. Today would be different. As soon as she crossed the threshold, Margaret spotted Jake leaning against the reception desk, scrolling through his phone. A sense of determination surged through her, pushing back the shadows of doubt. She walked straight up to him, her heels clicking assertively against the polished floor. "Jake," she said, her voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes, quickly replaced by an indifferent smirk. "Oh, it's you again," he said, folding his arms. "What can I do for you this time?" Margaret felt the heat rising in her cheeks but refused to back down. "I'm here to discuss my interest in the convertible. I've done my research and I know exactly what I want. I expect to be treated with respect, just like any other customer in this place." Jake's expression twisted into a combination of amusement and disdain. "You realize that car is a high-performance model, right? Not exactly tailored for someone in your age group?" He leaned back, a smug look plastered on his face. Margaret's heart pounded, a mix of anger and indignation surging through her. "Age has nothing to do with my ability to drive or enjoy a luxury car, Jake. I've worked hard all my life, and I deserve to treat myself, just like anyone else. You may think I'm old, but I'm also capable and independent. Don't underestimate me." Elaine, who had been observing from a few steps away, stepped forward. "You tell him, Margaret," she encouraged, her voice ringing with support. "You have every right to be here." Margaret turned to Elaine, feeling a rush of gratitude. The warmth of camaraderie fortified her resolve. "Thank you, Elaine," she said, then looked back at Jake, her chin raised defiantly. "I demand equal treatment, and the same respect you would give to any younger customer." Jake scoffed, clearly unamused. "Look, lady, I'm just saying it like it is. Maybe you should consider something more practical." Margaret felt the anger boiling beneath her skin, but she took a deep breath, focusing on the strength she felt from Elaine's presence. "Practicality isn't what I'm looking for. I want that convertible, and I'm not leaving until I at least get a test drive. It's time you realize that you're in the wrong here, not me." Jake hesitated, caught off guard by Margaret's unexpected assertiveness. He shot a glance at Elaine, who was nodding encouragingly, and then back at Margaret, whose eyes sparkled with resolve. "Fine," he muttered, rolling his eyes. "I'll get the keys, but don't say I didn't warn you." As he walked away, Margaret glanced at Elaine, who was beaming with pride. "You were amazing, Margaret. I can't believe how strong you stood your ground." "I didn't feel strong," Margaret confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I knew that if I didn't say something, this would just keep happening." Elaine nodded. "That's exactly it. We can't let them treat us like we're invisible. You've inspired me." Before they could continue their conversation, Jake returned, tossing the keys onto the counter with a dismissive gesture. "Here you go. Just be careful. I don't want to be responsible if something happens." Margaret took the keys, feeling the weight of them in her palm, and turned towards the exit, motioning for Elaine to follow. "Let's take this for a spin, shall we?" Outside, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the sleek silver convertible. Margaret smiled as she approached the car, the sight of it igniting a familiar thrill within her. She slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against her skin. It felt luxurious and powerful, just as she had imagined. Elaine settled into the passenger seat, her face alight with excitement. "Are you ready?" Margaret asked, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "Absolutely," Elaine replied, her enthusiasm contagious. Margaret turned the ignition, the engine purring to life, and she felt a rush of exhilaration. As she pulled out of the dealership, she couldn't help but smile. The wind whipped through her hair, and for a moment, she felt young again. They drove through the streets, the convertible gliding smoothly, the world around them a blur of colors and sounds. "This is incredible," Elaine exclaimed, looking around. "You deserve this, Margaret. You really do." They drove for what felt like an eternity, both women reveling in the freedom the car symbolized. Eventually, they found a quiet park and parked the car under the shade of a large oak tree. Margaret turned off the engine, and they both sat in comfortable silence, soaking in the moment. "Do you know," Elaine began, breaking the silence, "I've always wanted a convertible like this, but I've never had the nerve to go for it. You've inspired me to think differently about what I deserve at this stage in my life." Margaret smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her heart. "You should go for it, Elaine. We're not done living just because we've hit a certain number. Life is too short to let anyone dictate how we should enjoy it." Their conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and stories of their pasts. Margaret shared tales of her youth, her adventures, and the dreams she had once put on hold for her family. Elaine listened intently, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "Margaret, you're a force of nature," Elaine said, her voice filled with sincerity. "We need to make sure that other women like us know they can stand up for themselves, too. We shouldn't let anyone make us feel less than we are." As they returned to the dealership, Margaret felt a surge of empowerment. She had confronted Jake, taken the convertible for a spin, and had shared a meaningful connection with Elaine. When they stepped back inside, she noticed that Mr. Collins, the dealership manager, was now observing from a distance, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "What's going on here?" he asked, striding towards them with an air of authority. Margaret squared her shoulders, ready to confront yet another obstacle. "I'm interested in purchasing this convertible, Mr. Collins, but I want to ensure that I am treated with the respect I deserve as a customer." Jake, standing near the reception desk, looked visibly uncomfortable. "I was just—" "Enough, Jake," Mr. Collins interrupted, raising a hand. He turned his attention back to Margaret. "I'll make sure you're taken care of. We value all our customers here, regardless of age." Margaret raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying condescension in his tone. "I hope so, because I won't be dismissed or patronized. I expect the same level of service as anyone else." Mr. Collins shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Margaret and Elaine, who stood resolutely beside her. "Right. Let's discuss your options, shall we?" As they moved towards his office, Margaret couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. With Elaine by her side, she was ready to challenge the status quo, not just for herself, but for all women who had faced similar struggles. Together, they would forge a path toward respect and equality, proving that true strength comes not just from individual resilience, but from the bonds of community. Margaret Thompson felt an unexpected sense of empowerment blossoming within her as she and Elaine continued to meet regularly. Each afternoon, they gathered in a cozy corner of the local coffee shop, a charming place adorned with colorful murals and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. As they sipped their drinks, the duo began to share stories not just of their personal experiences with ageism, but also of the broader societal attitudes that often overlook the wisdom and capabilities of seniors. Do you remember that time I went to the grocery store and the cashier practically ignored me? Margaret recalled, her voice steady yet tinged with a hint of indignation. I was just asking about a product, and she looked at me as if I were a ghost. It's as if they think we're invisible. Elaine nodded, her expression somber yet understanding. I've had similar experiences. It's like they forget that we've lived full lives, that we have stories to tell and knowledge to share. The world seems to think we've lost our value just because we've aged. As their conversations deepened, they began to brainstorm ways to raise awareness about age discrimination. They wanted to create a safe space for others like them, a community where seniors could come together to share their stories and find strength in solidarity. One afternoon, with the sun streaming through the cafe windows, Margaret suggested, "What if we started a group, a support network for women who face similar treatment? We could meet regularly and empower each other." Elaine's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "I love that idea. We could call it something like Seniors for Respect or Golden Voices. What do you think?" Margaret laughed lightly, the sound bringing a warmth to the cafe. "Golden Voices sounds lovely. It embodies our wisdom and the strength we carry. Let's do it." Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly to spread the word. They created flyers, posted on social media, and reached out to local community centers. Soon, their initiative began to attract attention. Women from all walks of life started to join, sharing their own stories of dismissal and disrespect in various settings. Each meeting was filled with laughter, tears, and a shared realization that they were not alone in their struggles. On one particularly sunny afternoon, as they gathered at the coffee shop, the group had swelled to 10 women, all eager to share and support one another. Margaret stood to speak, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Thank you all for being here. We're not just a group, we're a community. Together, we can raise our voices against ageism. Let's create a movement that shows the world we are still vibrant, capable, and deserving of respect." The room erupted in applause, and Margaret felt a rush of warmth wash over her. She looked around at the faces of her new friends, each one filled with determination and hope. Among them was Doris, a spirited 72-year-old who had been a school teacher for over 40 years. "I had a similar experience at a family gathering last month," Doris shared, her voice strong and clear. "My niece brought her friends over, and they didn't even acknowledge my presence. It was as if I didn't exist. It was hurtful, but being here makes me feel valued again." The women shared more stories, each one echoing the sentiments of the last. As they discussed their experiences, they began to identify common themes: disregard, invisibility, and the frustration of being underestimated. It was empowering, and Margaret could feel the bonds forming between them, a camaraderie built on understanding and shared experiences. As their meetings continued, the idea of a peaceful protest emerged. They wanted to take their message to the streets and raise awareness about age discrimination publicly. "We need to show everyone that we won't be silenced," Elaine stated passionately during one of their sessions. "A peaceful protest could be a powerful way to convey our message." Margaret felt a wave of exhilaration wash over her. "Let's do it!" she exclaimed, her fists clenched in determination. "We can gather outside the dealership and hold signs. We'll share our stories with the public and the media. It's time for us to be heard." The women rallied around the idea, brainstorming slogans and signs that would resonate with their message. They decided on phrases like "age is just a number" and "respect your elders," each one capturing the essence of their collective fight against ageism. The energy in the room was electric, a palpable sense of purpose filling the air. As the day of the protest approached, Margaret felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never participated in a protest before, but the thought of standing up for herself and her friends filled her with a sense of purpose. The group met regularly to finalize their plans, discussing logistics and what they would say to the crowd. On the eve of the protest, Margaret sat in her living room, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating her thoughts. She reflected on her journey thus far, from the hurt she felt at the dealership to the strength she found in her newfound community. She picked up her phone and texted Elaine, "I can't believe we're actually doing this. I feel so empowered." Elaine replied almost instantly, "Me too. Tomorrow is going to be amazing. We're going to show everyone that we matter." Margaret smiled, feeling a sense of solidarity that she hadn't experienced in years. She thought about all the women who would stand by her side, their signs held high, their voices strong. They would be a force to be reckoned with, a powerful testament to resilience in the face of adversity. The next morning, Margaret dressed carefully, choosing a bright yellow blouse that made her feel vibrant and alive. She applied a touch of lipstick and looked in the mirror, reminding herself of the strength she had cultivated through this journey. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. As she arrived at the dealership, her heart raced with anticipation. The other women were already there, their signs waving in the gentle breeze. Margaret joined them, feeling the warmth of camaraderie envelop her. They formed a line, and as they stood together, she could see the determination in their eyes. "Ready?" Elaine asked, her voice steady. "Ready," Margaret replied, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Together, they took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to make their voices heard and stand against the discrimination that had sought to silence them for far too long. On the day of the protest, the sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the city. But for Margaret Thompson, it felt like the dawn of a new era. She stood at the front of the luxury car dealership, a place that had once brought her only disappointment, now transformed into a stage for her defiance. Clutching her sign that boldly read, "Age is just a number," she felt the fabric of her shirt flutter in the gentle breeze, as if it were a flag announcing her newfound purpose. Beside her, Elaine held a sign that proclaimed, "Respect your elders," her face beaming with pride and solidarity. Margaret took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the nearby blooming flowers, a reminder of life's beauty and the new beginnings it could bring. She scanned the crowd, her heart swelling with gratitude, as she noticed not just the women from their group, but also other allies who had joined them in solidarity. The sight of their smiling faces filled her with hope and determination. "Are you ready for this, Margaret?" Elaine asked, her voice a melodic blend of excitement and encouragement. Margaret nodded, her eyes sparkling with conviction. "Absolutely. We're here to make our voices heard." As the protest commenced, more and more people gathered, drawn by curiosity and the powerful message emanating from the group of women standing resolute outside the dealership. Margaret's heart raced, not from fear, but from the exhilarating rush of empowerment. The women began chanting slogans, their voices harmonizing in a chorus of unity. "Age is just a number," they shouted, their words echoing through the streets. "Respect your elders," came the response, strong and clear. Margaret could see a few passers-by stop, intrigued by the scene unfolding before them. Some raised their phones, capturing moments for social media, while others nodded in agreement, showing their support. It was a movement, one that transcended age and gender, uniting the community against the insidious nature of ageism. Suddenly, a news crew arrived, their cameras rolling as they approached the group. A young reporter, her eager expression lighting up her face, stepped forward and asked, "Can I interview you? What's the purpose of today's protest?" Margaret felt a surge of adrenaline. This was her chance to share her story, to give a voice to the silent struggles of so many. She stepped forward, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady. "We're here to challenge the age discrimination that exists in places like this dealership. We deserve respect and to be treated like any other customer, regardless of our age." The reporter nodded, captivated by Margaret's passion. "And how has your experience been at this dealership?" Margaret took a breath, her mind racing back to that painful encounter with Jake. "I came here to buy my dream car after years of hard work, but instead, I faced ridicule and dismissal simply because of my age. That should not happen to anyone, and today we're standing together to say enough is enough." The crowd cheered, their voices rising in a powerful wave of affirmation. Elaine joined her side, adding, "We want to show the world that older adults are vibrant, capable, and deserving of the same respect as anyone else. We refuse to be marginalized." As the interview continued, other women stepped forward, sharing their experiences of ageism in various forms, each story weaving into the collective narrative of their fight for dignity. They spoke of being overlooked in stores, ignored in conversations, and dismissed in professional settings. Each tale resonated, creating a tapestry of resilience and strength that enveloped the crowd. Meanwhile, inside the dealership, Jake and Mr. Collins watched the protest unfold through the glass doors. A mix of annoyance and disbelief washed over their faces. Jake crossed his arms, leaning against the counter. "Can you believe this? It's just a bunch of old women making a scene," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. Mr. Collins adjusted his tie, his expression one of irritation. "Let them protest. It won't change anything. We have policies in place and they're just trying to make a fuss over nothing." Yet deep down, he felt a twinge of unease. The gathering outside was growing, and the media attention was something he hadn't anticipated. "Look at them," Jake said dismissively, glancing back at the protest. "They think they can just waltz in here and demand respect. It's ridiculous." But as the chants grew louder and the energy outside pulsed with determination, Margaret's voice rose above the crowd. "We are not invisible. We are here, and we demand to be seen and heard." Her words cut through the air, piercing the bubble of complacency that surrounded the dealership. The crowd erupted in cheers. "Margaret! Margaret! Margaret!" Their support fueled her fire, and she felt more powerful than ever. She knew they were not just fighting for themselves, but for all those who had been silenced, for those who had been made to feel less than they truly were. The reporter, sensing the momentum, turned back to Margaret. "What message do you want to send to the dealership and to others who might be facing similar discrimination?" Margaret smiled, her heart full. "I want them to know that we will not be quiet. We deserve to be respected, not just as customers, but as human beings with rich lives and experiences. Our age should be celebrated, not used against us. Change needs to happen, and we will be the ones to make it happen." As she spoke, the crowd erupted once more, their voices melding into a powerful anthem of change. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a sense of purpose that was palpable. Margaret felt a deep connection with each person surrounding her, a sense of community that had been forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. Inside the dealership, Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should do something," he murmured, glancing at Mr. Collins. "Like what?" Mr. Collins snapped, his irritation bubbling to the surface. "They're just making noise. It will pass." But Jake could see the crowd growing, the media presence increasing. "I don't think it will pass. They're serious about this." Margaret's voice continued to rise, her passion infectious. "We are not just old ladies with nothing better to do. We have stories, experiences, and dreams just like anyone else. We deserve to fulfill those dreams without facing discrimination." As the protest continued, the energy was undeniable. Margaret knew they were making an impact, not just on the dealership, but on the broader conversation about ageism and respect. She felt a profound sense of hope for the future, a future where age would be seen as a badge of honor rather than a reason for ridicule. And while Jake and Mr. Collins remained behind their glass fortress, the world outside was changing, one chant, one story, one voice at a time. Margaret felt the weight of generations behind her, lending strength to her cause and igniting a fire in her spirit. Today was not just about her dream car. It was about reclaiming dignity and respect for all who had been marginalized, a movement that would echo long after the last chant faded into the distance. Margaret stood at the forefront of the protest, her heart swelling with pride as she held her handmade sign, "Age is just a number," aloft. The sun cast a warm glow on the group of women surrounding her, all united in their quest for respect and dignity. They shouted slogans, their voices echoing through the air, a chorus of empowerment. It was a beautiful day, but beneath the surface, the reality of ageism still loomed large. As the crowd began to gather, a sense of anticipation buzzed in the air. They knew that their message was important, not just for themselves, but for all seniors who felt marginalized. Among them stood Elaine, her silver hair catching the sunlight, her expression fierce as she cheered on Margaret. "Look at us! We're making a difference!" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Just then, a sleek black car slowed near the curb, its tinted windows rolling down to reveal a middle-aged man with an air of authority. He was dressed in an elegant suit, the kind that spoke of success and influence. Margaret couldn't help but notice the curious glances exchanged between him and his passenger, a young woman with a notebook in her lap. She was clearly a reporter, her interest piqued by the scene unfolding before her. The man, Marcus Hale, a well-known philanthropist in the community, leaned out of the window, his brow furrowed in concern. "What's happening here?" he called out, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. The protest momentarily hushed as the women turned to him, intrigued. Margaret took a deep breath, her heart racing. "We're protesting age discrimination at this dealership," she shouted back, her voice strong and clear. "They treated me and my friends like we didn't matter just because of our age." Marcus nodded, his expression shifting from curiosity to empathy. He stepped out of the car, the reporter quickly following suit, her camera poised to capture the moment. "I'd like to hear more about this," he said, his tone earnest. "Can you tell me your story?" The crowd parted slightly, allowing him to approach. Margaret felt a wave of encouragement wash over her as she began to recount her experience at the dealership, her voice unwavering. "I came here to buy my dream car, something I've worked hard for my entire life. But instead of being treated with respect, I was dismissed and belittled." Elaine chimed in. "We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who's ever felt invisible just because they've aged." Marcus listened intently, nodding as he absorbed their words. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice rising slightly as he turned to face the dealership. "People deserve to be treated with dignity, regardless of their age. It's time for a change." As he spoke, Margaret could feel the energy shift. The crowd began to murmur in agreement, their spirits lifted by the support of this influential man. Marcus walked toward the dealership, his presence commanding attention, and the women followed closely behind, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Inside the dealership, Mr. Collins was busy reviewing paperwork, oblivious to the growing commotion outside. Suddenly, he was interrupted by a firm knock on the glass door. He looked up, startled, to see Marcus standing there, flanked by the group of elderly women, their signs now pressed against the glass. "What's going on?" Mr. Collins asked, irritation lacing his voice as he stepped outside to meet them. Marcus wasted no time. "I've just heard some troubling stories about how your dealership treats its elderly customers," he said, his voice steady, yet filled with urgency. "This is a serious matter, and I'm here to demand change." Mr. Collins crossed his arms defensively, eyeing the women with disdain. "We're just running a business here, Mr. Hale. We cater to a specific clientele." "Specific clientele?" Marcus interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "You mean you're discriminating against a significant portion of the population? That's not a business model. That's a disgrace." The tension in the air was palpable, and Margaret felt a surge of hope as she watched the confrontation unfold. She had spent her life being dismissed, but now here was a man of influence standing up for her and her friends. "Your dealership should be a place where everyone feels welcome," Marcus continued, gesturing toward the women with a sweeping motion. "You need to train your staff to treat all customers with respect, regardless of their age. Otherwise, you'll find that your business will suffer. People are talking and they're listening." Mr. Collins shifted uncomfortably, his bravado faltering under the weight of the public scrutiny. "I'll look into it," he said reluctantly, but Marcus wasn't done yet. "I'm not asking for a favor. I'm demanding accountability," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "You will implement new training procedures, and you will publicly apologize to these women. If you don't take immediate action, I will make sure your practices are brought to light." The reporter captured every moment, her camera flashing as she documented the exchange. Margaret felt a thrill run through her. This was the support they had longed for, the validation of their struggles. As the confrontation concluded, Marcus turned back toward the women, a triumphant smile on his face. "You have allies," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "Together, we can make a difference." Margaret felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but this time, they were tears of joy. The warmth of community enveloped her, and she could see the fire igniting in the hearts of her fellow protesters. They had come together to fight for justice, and now they stood on the brink of making real change. Days passed, and the momentum didn't fade. The dealership, under pressure from both the media and the community, began to implement new training programs. Mr. Collins had no choice but to acknowledge the need for change. Margaret felt a sense of empowerment she had never experienced before. It was as if she had finally found her voice. On a bright Saturday morning, Margaret returned to the dealership, her heart pounding with excitement. Today was the day she would finally purchase her dream car. As she walked through the doors, she noticed a newly designed section dedicated to showcasing the dealership's commitment to inclusivity. "Welcome back, Ms. Thompson," a new salesman greeted her with a warm smile. "We're so glad to see you again. How can I assist you today?" Margaret felt a surge of gratitude. "I'm here to buy a car," she replied, her voice steady. "The one I wanted before." She felt the eyes of her newfound friends supporting her from behind. Elaine winked at her, pride radiating from her presence. As they finalized the paperwork, Margaret couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The journey hadn't just been about a car, it had been about standing up for herself and others like her. She had discovered a community that valued her, and for the first time in years, she felt truly seen. When the keys to her sleek silver convertible were finally handed to her, Margaret couldn't contain her joy. She looked around at the women who had fought beside her, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "We did this together," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all for believing in me." As she drove off the lot, the wind in her hair and the sun shining down, Margaret knew that this was just the beginning. They had ignited a movement, and together, they would continue to fight for respect, dignity, and justice for all.